Hello, Cleveland. Welcome to the Dogland Podcast. I am your host, Anthony Joki. As always, I got Jack McCurry rolling alongside with me. Jack, man, how we doing today?
Doing all right. Still on vacation. I got to go into work tomorrow, and then I'm off again the rest of the week. But can't complain about much. I'm healthy. Life's good. Browns are 4-1, man. So not too much to complain about.
Yeah, it's been a fun week. Last really yesterday and today. After the Browns going 4-1, things are a lot less stressful when you think about football and think about the Browns. And this is something that you and I haven't seen before. We were both like 2-3 the last time that a 4-1 start has happened for the Browns. So this is the first time that we really get to experience this, and it's a fun ride. And obviously there's a big game on Sunday against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and we want to get in here. We're going to have Tony Serino on Thursday to break that game down. But on this episode, we have some Browns news to discuss. We're going to go around the AFC North a little bit and even talk some topics that are going around the NFL currently.
Anthony, I don't mean to cut you off, but I completely forgot because I mentioned this Sunday night. This is our 200th episode of the pod too, man. It's crazy.
It just shows, I guess, our awareness of where we're at right now. It's crazy. Yeah, it is crazy that we've done 200 of these things. When we started this thing, was it 4 years ago now?
It was spring of 2017. So yeah, it was about 4 seasons ago. So yeah, it's been crazy. Time has flown.
We've suffered through a lot of losing. So the fact that we're 4 right now is a nice change of pace, and hopefully it continues to be that way. We wanted to discuss some of the Browns news that's out there. And Jack, we're going to start with Greedy Williams, who the Browns placed on injured reserve on Monday with a pinch or just a nerve damage in his shoulder. It's not a pinched nerve; it's just nerve damage in his shoulder. They thought, and many people thought that over the last 3 or 4 weeks he'd be able to play, he'd be able to get in there, but it just hasn't happened. And I think clearly there's some kind of setback with Greedy, and I know they were expecting him to do a lot this season. Jack, without having Greedy in there, they've done between Terrace Mitchell and Denzel Ward, they've done a decent job. But now, for the foreseeable future, Greedy's not going to be there. So how do you think this secondary, who has been hit hard with injuries all year long, is now going to have to continue to not have one of its projected starters at cornerback?
Yeah, it's really disappointing that, we may not see Greedy Williams at all this season. I know Kevin Stefanski and even Adam Schefter reiterated that they're hopeful he'll come back. He doesn't need surgery, which is a good thing. But it is disappointing because, Greedy was one of these guys that everybody was going to keep an eye on, see if he was going to be able to have a bounce back second year after a rookie year in which he struggled. But who knows? And now his future will be even more in the air because, the Browns could be in a situation next year where, Mitchell will be a free agent, Kevin Johnson will be a free agent, and the Browns could be in a spot where they draft another corner, especially because there are some talented corners coming out in the 2021 draft. So definitely going to be something to keep an eye on there. It's interesting that, this could be why the Browns didn't place him on IR at the beginning of the year, because they were probably hopeful that, the nerve damage would, heal up in time. And they didn't feel like maybe they had to put him on injured reserve. Now they're in a situation where they felt they had to maybe shut him down because maybe they were trying to get him to work through it or see if he could rehab it. Now they might just be shutting him down just to see if it'll heal on its own with more time. And if not, they'll take the next step. But definitely disappointing. Greedy was one of the guys I was definitely keeping an eye on coming into this season. But now it's just kind of sit and wait. But, it's not a major loss because Terrence Mitchell's played well. Kevin Johnson has slid in comfortably into that nickel role. we've seen flashes from other corners as well. So, and of course we have Denzel, who's one of the best in the game. So all is not lost, but it's unfortunate that we won't get to see Greedy for some time now.
Yeah, thank goodness there's a little bit of depth there with Ward and Crew, at least at cornerback. Those they've played well as a unit. I know the rest of the secondary really hasn't, but they've kind of held it down so far, and hopefully, knock on wood, nothing else happens to where they be really put in the bind. But they're not going to have Greedy for the foreseeable future. Another guy they're not going to have for the foreseeable future is Garrett Gilbert, who signed with the Dallas Cowboys. Gilbert was on the Browns practice squad after being cut during the roster cutdowns back when those got trimmed. And so he heads to Dallas, and now I would imagine they'd have to find a practice squad quarterback unless they have a second one on there that I'm forgetting at the moment. But Dallas obviously lost Dak Prescott probably for the season, most likely for the season, and so they're more likely he'll be Andy Dalton's backup for the foreseeable future down in Dallas.
Yeah, I mean, all the NFL teams have had the ability to protect guys, but the day after games, typically Monday, teams have that window to where they can snatch guys off the practice squad. And Dallas obviously took that moment and signed Garrett Gilbert to have as a third quarterback. He might end up being the backup, like you said, to Andy Dalton. It's unfortunate because he had that connection with Baker Mayfield. They're from the same town, went to the same school. And, the fact that the Browns had protected Gilbert each of the first few weeks of the season showed that they, I think had a vested interest in him to keep him around as an extra arm just in case. Especially this week, it's kind of concerning because, Baker has, that rib injury. He was, shaking his hand a little bit when he took some of them hits late in the game on Sunday. Maybe there would have been a situation where they call him up to, potentially be an emergency quarterback had, Baker for some reason wouldn't be able to play, although he's going to, and they'd have to throw Keenum out there. So I think it's a hit for the Browns, but like you said, maybe they go out and find somebody else to sign to the practice squad. They did have, I think his name was Davidson during training camp. Maybe they bring him back. So, we wouldn't have seen Gilbert probably this year, but obviously the Browns had some kind of trust in him that they kept him around on the practice squad.
Yeah, maybe if one of our backups was playing, we'd have a better record according to some radio stations. But I'm not surprised he got poached. I know he's had that connection. Really, the Browns are extremely comfortable having Keenum as a backup. They gave him quite a bit of money, so they'll be able to find somebody to stick on there on the practice squad at some point. Going around the AFC North, something that we wanted to do on this podcast and kind of, look at the current situation, because right now, Jack, there are three teams in the AFC North that are really fighting for that top spot with the Baltimore Ravens, the Pittsburgh Steelers, who still haven't lost a game yet, and the Cleveland Browns. And when you look at these three teams, a lot of people thought going into the season that there's a possibility with the expanded playoffs that these three teams could get into the postseason. And right now, if the season were to end today, that would be the case. Jack, are we surprised by the amount of wins that the AFC North has piled up to pretty much be the best division in football with the Browns, the Steelers, and the Ravens?
No, not at all. I think, when they expanded the playoffs this year, I think a lot of people had three AFC North teams just because the amount of talent on each of those teams and the starts that they're all having, it's not a surprise. I mean, Baltimore was coming coming off a 14-2 season last year. Obviously, they got knocked out in the divisional round, or was it the wild card round? I don't remember, but I mean, they obviously had a good team, brought practically everybody back except Earl Thomas. We knew Pittsburgh was always going to be a threat because of their defense and the fact that Ben Roethlisberger was coming back. And then, the Browns were an unknown, according to some, but I think it's clear and evident now that, they upgraded the talent on the lines of scrimmage. They upgraded their coach, which obviously wasn't hard to do if you watched Freddie Kitchens last year. So, I mean, we're sitting now, we got 3 teams with at least 4 wins. And, if the playoffs started today, they'd all make the playoffs. And I think by the end of the season, all 3 are going to be in the playoff hunt, barring some epic collapse or unforeseen injury.
Yeah. On the other side of things, you have the Cincinnati Bengals, who have struggled mightily this year. And, it's that, no fault to their quarterback, who Joe Burrow has done a great job, being the number 1 overall pick. The problem with them is the offensive line, and we saw this last couple seasons with Baker Mayfield. The offensive line for the Bengals is not very good, to put it plain and simple. And Joe Burrow is constantly getting pressured, constantly getting hit. I was watching the game on Sunday against the Ravens, and I'll tell you what, he was getting hit every other play, and it's a shame that he has to endure that. You hope that nothing serious happens, but the way that offensive line looks, it looks like that at some point this season they're going to get him killed, and I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't make it through the entire season with the way the offensive line is playing.
Yeah, I mean, he's already been sacked 22 times in 5 games, and I did the math. He's on pace to be sacked 73 times if it stays on this pace through the whole 16-game season. And, we talked about this when we were previewing the Week 2 matchup, Browns versus Bengals, and we've seen what our defensive front did to their offensive line. It's real unfortunate because we all know how talented Joe Burrow is. Put it on display at LSU. Obviously, he was talented coming out of high school. That's why Ohio State recruited him. But we knew this was the situation for him. They have all these skilled players down there in Cincinnati, but it all comes down to the offensive line. If they don't protect him, then Burrow doesn't have time to make throws and make plays. Everybody was saying, oh, he's the next Derek Carr, or not Derek Carr, David Carr. We've seen the beating that he took for that expansion Houston Texans team, and it ruined his career, obviously. I mean, he was out of there within 3 or 4 years. He was a backup the rest of his career. Never got to see what David Carr truly was as an NFL quarterback. So hopefully they get that together in Cincinnati, except when they play the Browns, obviously, because Burrow is mega talented and he can get that franchise on the right track. But, I mean, if he keeps taking a beating, we may never truly know how talented he really is.
You mentioned the talent that they have on offense there. Guys like Joe Mixon and A.J. Green and Tyler Boyd, the other receivers that they have. A.J. Green's kind of not been a factor this season, and there's a instance on Sunday during the game against the Ravens where I don't know how much you want to get into lip reading, but it looked like whoever he was talking to, he said something to the effect of "just trade me then." Jack, would you be surprised if AJ Green is on the Bengals by the time the trade deadline comes?
I mean, this was talked about last year, and there was obviously the theory out there that his foot injury was just a way for him to not play because he knows, how bad the Cincinnati Bengals are. I just don't think that AJ Green is handling this situation the right way. I think it's obvious he would like to move on. He's entering his 9th, 10th season. He clearly wants to go play for a contender. You just don't do business this way. I know it works. It works for some, but like Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown, but you obviously see where they're at right now in their NFL careers. One is about to get traded for, nickels and pennies, and the other one's out of the league. So I mean, could I see AJ Green moved? Maybe. He's got a big contract, big cap hit. Would be interesting to see who would be interested in him and where he potentially fits. But unfortunately, I think he's stuck in Cincinnati, at least through this season. And then, he can sign with someone else when he becomes a free agent this offseason.
We know that ownership down there doesn't really like to move players like that, especially ones that are on heavy contracts. So, I would definitely not be surprised if he's on the Bengals after the trade deadline, but it certainly wouldn't shock me if they're able to find somebody to take on that contract and, get some draft capital in return. It's not going to be much, but I wouldn't be surprised if they just decide to go ahead and move on from him. The team that they played on Sunday, the Baltimore Ravens, are continuing to have a fast start. They only have one loss on the season, and the Ravens, while looked impressive defensively against the Bengals, they kind of struggled a little bit on offense. I know they put up quite a bit of points, but it was a struggle on Sunday for Lamar Jackson to get things going. We saw this early in the season last year for the Ravens, where they struggled to get things going, and after 5-6 weeks, everything just clicked, and it propelled them all the way into the playoffs, where they eventually lost to the Tennessee Titans. Do you feel that things will get clicking again for this Ravens offense to where they could be as dominant as they were last season?
Yeah, I think so. I think, part of that could be, just, trying to get Lamar to throw more. And I think they're trying to showcase his abilities as a passer. And while Lamar can throw, that's obviously not the strength of his game. The strength of the game, and obviously the Ravens offense, is the running game. And, while I think Lamar wants to prove to people that he can throw and he can be one of these elite passers in the league, you got to keep rolling with what got you to this point. And what got you to this point is obviously the running game. And while they are still putting up great numbers, 161 rushing yards per game, and obviously you have three talented backs back there in Ingram, Edwards, Dobbins, and obviously we know Lamar's ability as a runner too. Just keep doing that. And when you keep doing that, the passing's going to open up. And I think also part of it is, you don't really have a serious threat at wide receiver or even tight end, even though Mark Andrews having a great season so far, 222 yards, 5 touchdowns. You have Marquise Brown, but is he really a legit number one threat? I would say no. So I think, if they want that passing game to open up, they may need to go out and find a legit number one receiver. Maybe they call Cincinnati and ask them what it will take to get AJ Green. Wouldn't want to see that as a Browns fan personally, but they were linked to Dez Bryant. They were linked to Antonio Brown during the offseason. I think they were even linked to Josh Gordon at one point, and he's already re-signed with the Seattle Seahawks, and obviously is waiting reinstatement. But if the Ravens want to prove, and Lamar Jackson wants to prove that he can be one of these elite passing quarterbacks, they may need to go out and get that legit home run threat at wide receiver, because I just don't know if Marquise Brown's really going to be that guy for him long term.
Speaking of wide receivers, the team that the Browns play on Sunday, the Pittsburgh Steelers, their rookie wide receiver, Chase Claypool, scored 4 touchdowns in their win over the Eagles. He had 3 receiving touchdowns, and he ended up getting another one on a run. Jack, it just seems that Pittsburgh, year after year, is able to find talent in the draft, in that wide receiver room, whether it's Antonio Brown or it's Juju Schuster, whether now it's this year with Chase Claypool. I know there was a lot of talk that Claypool could move to tight end during the draft process, but the Steelers have found a very good way to utilize him, and you saw that with the incredible production that he had in the Steelers win on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, I was amazed by him, and I think he was a tight end at Notre Dame, but they have converted him to a wide receiver, and I mean, he's getting off to an unbelievable start. I mean, and this is something I think we should definitely talk about with Tony later this week. The Steelers, and you mentioned it, they just keep churning out wide receivers year after year. And, there's the talk in Pittsburgh, are they going to extend Juju Smith-Schuster? Well, honestly, you're looking at it right now, you won't need to. You have James Washington there, who's, practically their fourth receiver right now. You got Deontay Johnson, who many think is another star in the making at receiver. Claypool, obviously. And they had a guy on Sunday, Ray McLeod. He's 24 years old. He was making plays as both with jet sweeps and all that. So that could be another wide receiver they have in the making. But they just continue to churn them out. I'm fascinated to see what they do in terms of developing wide receivers, because that would be something that maybe the Browns need to implement for when Landry and Beckham hit the backside of their careers. The Browns have wide receivers to step up and start contributing after they're gone. So Claypool is a stud. Hopefully the Browns are developing a solid game plan to shut him down on Sunday, because he's definitely probably their biggest threat on offense right now.
I think the thing with Pittsburgh, and I agree that we should talk to Tony about this on Thursday, is the thing about what Pittsburgh always does so well is they draft guys 2 or 3 years in advance of the person they're going to be replacing. It's not often where you get a rookie like Claypool in there and make an immediate impact for the Steelers. And I think that's what makes the situation very different. They have a guy in Juju on the other side of him, but if Claypool is able to continue up the production he had in this game on Sunday, they're certainly going to have to play him more often and not let him sit and whatnot. He certainly seems to have forced his way onto the football field. It paid off for them on Sunday, and now they've shown that, all right, now we have two guys you really have to cover and look over to go on top of James Washington and others. So they're going to have to pay attention to where Claypool is at all times, and obviously where Juju is among others. And they're certainly going to challenge this Brown secondary who, let's be honest, has been less than stellar.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our secondary is going to have to play their best game all season this Sunday, because there are so many weapons in that Steelers offense that, it's going to be up to, and especially the safeties like Sendejo. He's been struggling. He needs to have his best game. Whether it's Ronnie Harrison or Carl Joseph or Sheldrick Redwine, they got to protect that middle of the field, because you have all these guys who can kill you with the big play. And all it takes is one of those deep throws by Ben, even though he's been struggling with that deep ball this year, which isn't a surprise coming off the elbow injury. But all it takes is one big play, and it could really make or break the Browns' potential 5-game winning streak, and it could really shift the game on Sunday for sure.
Before we get out of here, Jack, we wanted to go around the NFL a little bit and touch upon some of the news topics that are going on currently. It's weird to have an NFL game on a Tuesday, but that's what we're going to have tonight. The Tennessee Titans finally get back on the football field as they play the Buffalo Bills this evening. Obviously, Tennessee has dealt with a whole bunch of COVID cases and an outbreak within the team. Jack, I know you and I have talked off air about the NFL's handling of the schedule for this game, and among other games that they've had to move. Jack, after being gone for so long, are the Tennessee Titans going to be able to, you think, still compete and play at a high level tonight against the Buffalo Bills?
Yeah, I think they're gonna look a little rusty. That's for sure, because obviously, their training facility's been shut down. They did go practice at a high school field last week and got busted for it. It's going to be interesting to see how the league throws down the hammer on them in terms of punishment, because there was the rules, like they couldn't group together with the facility being shut down. But Yeah, I think they'll be a little rusty. They're obviously going up against a tough Buffalo team that's been off to a hot start. So hopefully, it's a good game. Obviously, this is actually it's going to be interesting. Like, does the NFL toy with the idea of having Tuesday night football? I mean, obviously, I think they'd like to have it every night of the week if they'd like to. Um, but yeah, I mean, I would expect some rust at first by Tennessee, and then hopefully they get back on track. Maybe they just focus heavily on the running game tonight. Like if anybody has Derrick Henry in your fantasy football team, you might get a big outing out of him. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how good they look after being on such a layoff because of the COVID situation.
How do you feel about the NFL's handling of the schedule? I know we saw today where they're discussing that the playoffs and the Super Bowl could be in a controlled bubble, but with specifically what's happened to the Tennessee Titans and affected other teams as well, like the Steelers, where the Steelers had to have their bye week last week because the game was postponed, and they moved it on to later in the season. How do we feel about the NFL's handling of this and what they've done, what they haven't done with um, in terms of making everything right with the schedule and maybe not planning on something like this happening and including more bye weeks when they originally released the schedule?
Yeah, I think, they should have added more bye weeks and they needed to be more flexible with the schedule because I think everybody knew that this situation could happen and was going to happen. Once Tennessee had happened, and then obviously, New England losing two of their best players. To with the COVID virus, that they knew that everything had to be flexible, and obviously they shook everything up. I know some players weren't happy. Melvin Gordon was very outspoken when he said, like, we practiced all week, and then all of a sudden you're going to tell us we can't play because obviously New England had COVID cases and they had to shut things down. But you have the feel for some teams, but then again, you don't because some didn't follow the protocols, obviously, and kudos to the teams that haven't had COVID cases yet and have done things the right way. Hopefully, it shows that, if you do the right things, that this virus won't get you. And, obviously, you mentioned the bubble talk, like the NBA, prime example, the bubble worked. I mean, they handled it the right way. Yeah, players had to be away from their families, coaches had to be away from their families, media that was able to be in the bubble had to be away from their families for 3 months, but things got handled the right way. There was no hiccups, and they finished the season. And obviously, baseball is doing the playoff bubble. They're letting fans in for the championship series and the World Series, but they're proving that the bubble is working. I mean, obviously, they had their hiccups during the regular season, but I mean, the NFL, it's going to be interesting to see what they have in mind for their playoff bubble, but I think it just shows it's working. And if teams don't do the right things, obviously you're going to be in a situation like the Titans where you shook the whole schedule up just because you guys didn't handle the situation the right way and followed the correct protocol.
Yeah, I think the playoff bubbles is a really good idea. That's something that I think should have been a possibility from the get go of the season. Um, Moving on to the Saints now, who had a very nice come from behind win last night against the Los Angeles Chargers and Justin Herbert, who's looked very good so far this season. Excuse me. Um, they have an issue with one of their star players, Michael Thomas, who was in an altercation late last week. The team decided to discipline him. Much like AJ Green, maybe Thomas, with the things that have gone on there, could be facing being put on the trading block. Is that something that you could foresee, Jack?
Honestly, I'm not sure. I mean, it was surprising obviously Michael Thomas has been injured, and then you see these reports like he's not going to play. Then it comes out that he got in a fight with a teammate, and then there was a report today that he was being disobedient to the coaches when they told him to back off, calm down. And I mean, it's unlike him. We never heard this stuff at Ohio State when he was with the Buckeyes. But do I see them trading him? Maybe not yet. Maybe if it keeps continuing this way. I mean, obviously, they do say every superstar wide receiver has diva tendencies, and they're finally starting to come out of Michael Thomas. I don't think they'd trade him because I think you see that the Saints offense obviously seems more on point when he's out there, although they looked pretty good last night in the comeback win. It was funny. I had said in like the first half, I said, this is the week where we finally realized Phillip Rivers and Drew Brees were washed. And then, Brees leads them to comeback on a comeback victory with the Chargers. So I don't think they trade Thomas just yet. But, I mean, if he keeps acting like a diva, who knows?
There's also been two teams that have made head coaching changes. One is the Houston Texans, who fired Bill O'Brien, and the Atlanta Falcons, who fired Dan Quinn. Obviously, those two franchises have had high expectations, and Atlanta has done nothing but struggled since being up 28-3 against the Patriots in the Super Bowl a few years ago. Ever since then, things have just gone completely downhill for the Falcons, and with the Texans, that's going to be an interesting situation because whoever comes in there, the new general manager, new coach, they don't have a first or second round pick in next year's draft, and you would tend to think that players on that team, maybe besides like Deshaun Watson, everybody's touchable. I would think in terms of trades and being moved, and that's certainly something that could happen. I don't know how much they would trade without really having a GM right now, but I could certainly see some guys getting moved before the trading deadline, and kind of the same for the Falcons. If they want to move on from Matt Ryan, which is some of the talk today, that the ownership and Arthur Blank isn't really sold on him at this moment. So we could see two teams really sell off pieces here over the next couple of weeks before the trading deadline.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't get to talk about, obviously, Bill O'Brien getting fired last week, but, I think Bill O'Brien, the GM, really got Bill O'Brien, the coach, fired. I mean, you look at some of the moves he has made, trading DeAndre Hopkins, not getting much back in return for him, trading 2 number ones for Laramie Tunsil and paying him a big contract, yet the offensive line is still struggling. I think you just seen it when, Deshaun Watson and J.J. Watt, just their post-game press conferences prior to the firing, like, they did not look happy. There was obviously reports coming out after the fact that, J.J. Watt got into an argument with O'Brien on the practice field. So that just shows that they didn't have much confidence in him. They go out and win this past Sunday. Romeo Crennel's their interim coach. I mean, good job for Romeo. There's a video of him dancing in the locker room. Like, nice to see Romeo get another shot at head coach. He's obviously one of the best dudes in the NFL. In terms of their fire sale, I agree with you. Like, everybody but Deshaun Watson's up for grabs. The problem is they don't really have any players that could garner top draft picks. Maybe they trade J.J. Watt, but I don't see anybody giving up a first-round pick for him. Maybe a 2, maybe a 3 that could become a 2. A lot of the other guys are just not that talented. I don't see them garnering top draft picks. So, like you said, whoever the next GM and head coach is, they're kind of in a tough situation for the next couple years at least. And then with Atlanta, I mean, Dan Quinn getting fired wasn't a surprise, but Dimitrov kind of was their GM, although he's been there for a long time, and some of their top draft picks really didn't pan out outside of Matt Ryan and Julio Jones. It's going to be interesting to see what happens there. Obviously, Matt Ryan He's struggling, but he's got a big cap hit this year and next year. He's pretty much untradeable. Are they going to be in the QB market if they keep losing? I would think so, and then try to move Matt Ryan at some point. But they need to completely just tear that down. In Atlanta, I would think, they try to move Julio Jones. Maybe they move Alex Mack if a team needs an offensive lineman. But that's that. Both of those situations, if it wasn't for Deshaun Watson, I could see Houston and Atlanta just tearing it down and going full on rebuild. So those two situations are definitely going to be interesting to watch to see who they ultimately bring in as the next head coaches for each team.
At least it's nice that right now we don't have to worry about that. Hopefully, we're not worrying about that for like the next 10 years. I'm tired of coaching changes and looking at coaching candidates, and thankfully, we don't have to do that this year.
Absolutely.
For like I said, the next like 10 years, hopefully. So
now we're just waiting on the Jets, and when are they finally hire Adam Gase?
Yeah, that one is certainly the next one. I would think would come down. Is there any other coach you think is on the hot seat to where they could join the Falcons and the Texans and eventually the Jets and looking for a head coach?
Off the top of my head, Jacksonville seems like a next one that could likely happen. Does the Giants fire Joe Judge if they're 0-5 right now? Are they? Joe Judge was kind of a shocking hire at the time. It was Patriots special teams coach. No one really knew about him. He could be one, and I feel like at that point you would fire him. You might as well fire Gettleman and start over. Daniel Jones isn't looking too good, so they're going to be in the QB market, obviously. Anthony Lynn, maybe they're 1-4, although Justin Herbert's looking pretty damn good as a rookie. Those would be the teams, obviously, I could see coming next behind the Jets, Jacksonville, the Chargers, and the Giants. And even, the Lions, you got to talk about, obviously, Matt Patricia, he's struggling. The Vikings 1-4. Mike Zimmer's probably getting towards the end of the road. You always see 6 to 8 teams switching head coaches every year. So obviously we already had 2, and I just named 6 teams that all could be making switches at the end of the year for sure.
How about the Eagles coach, or do you give him possibly another quarterback to work with before you make that decision?
Let him, because let me see what he could do with Jalen Hurts before you really want to make the switch. It's obvious Doug Peterson showed something when he won that Super Bowl with Nick Foles. Carson Wentz has been struggling, and that looks better and better for Deep Podesta and Sashi every week. But yeah, I'd let him, see what he could do with Jalen Hurts. If it doesn't work, then pull the plug. But the NFC East is obviously a complete dumpster fire of a division as a whole. So who knows? I wouldn't cut ties with Doug Peterson just yet. He seemed like a pretty good coach. So I wouldn't throw him in there just yet, but crazier things have happened.
All right, Jack. As we get on out of here, is there anything else that we want to discuss?
No, we're good. I tweeted it out, but just thanks everybody that has listened or contributed to this podcast through the first 200 episodes. I won't speak for Anthony, but we definitely appreciate you guys for listening, and whoever's been a guest, thank you for coming on. We really appreciate it, and here's to 200 more.
Yeah, I'll let you speak for me because that's pretty much my sentiment as well. I really appreciate all our listeners, those who listen to us every week. Whenever we put out a podcast, those of you who read us on the website, those of us who have followed us and supported us, we truly appreciate it. And Jack and I, we do this because we love it. We really enjoy it, and without listeners, we really want to have a show. So, we really, truly appreciate all you guys and everybody else who's been on the podcast as a guest. We've had so many different people on, and it's just been a fantastic ride so far. And, we're going to continue this ride. and hopefully we can continue the ride with the Browns winning more games. Hopefully they win this game on Sunday against the Pittsburgh Steelers, move to 5-1. And if that's the case, this the city and this section of Ohio is going to be pretty much on fire, and it's going to be a great time. And um, until then, like I said, we'll be back Thursday night with Tony Serino. We'll talk Browns Steelers with him. Until then, and as always, most importantly, go Browns.